everybody. I'd like to welcome everyone today to this really amazing event, an opportunity to meet and talk to Bronx Borough President Vanessa Gibson. I'm Dr. Samantha Majic. I'm a professor in the political science department here at John Jay, where I also teach gender and politics. And so what I'd like to do is first briefly introduce Borough President Gibson, and then ask a couple of questions. And from there, we will go into a Q&A. Because I really hope that, we have a chance for a lot of students to ask a lot of questions. So for those of you who don't know, Borough President Gibson was raised in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, and she is actually a CUNY alumna. She received her MPA at Baruch College at CUNY in 2009. She was a member of the New York State Assembly, District 77 from 2009 to 2013, and then a New York City Council member for District 16 from 2014 to 2021, where she's held a number of positions across both of those legislative bodies. In November 2021, Borough President Gibson became Bronx Borough President Gibson, winning 79.7% of the vote to become Borough President. And she's also the first African-American and first woman to be the Bronx Borough President. Among the many issues that she advocates for and is concerned about, they include health equity, infrastructure, food insecurity, expanded green spaces, protected bike lanes, affordable housing, and police accountability. So we really look forward to hearing more about her work. Before I start with questions, Borough President Gibson, would you like to say anything to the crowd?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Majic. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor and privilege to be here with my distinguished colleagues at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. I am always honored to be in spaces with young people, our next generation of leaders. I'm always excited to talk about my work, my journey, and how I got to be where I am today. But as you heard my biography, I'm not new to this work, certainly true to this work, to the work of public service, making history on January 1st as the first ever African-American and female elected borough president of the Bronx is the greatest honor and privilege of my life. And every day that I wake up, I want to serve the residents of the Bronx. I want to serve with commitment, compassion, consistency, dedication, honesty, integrity. I really want to make a difference because I know that this is my season, this is my time, this is a new chapter of leadership, and I want to make it impactful. I want to make a difference, and I want to make sure as those who have poured into me, those who have planted the seed that you see before you today, it is my opportunity and my responsibility to now pour the same seeds into someone else and create footprints for all of you to follow. So this is March, the month of Women's History Month, and I love to celebrate women, first responders, essential workers, healthcare heroes, all of our women that have been on the front lines as educators, as professors, elected officials, so many of our essential workers who have been the fabrics of our communities day in and day out. And during the pandemic, we saw that in plain view. So I'm excited about talking to all of you today, and I want to wish everyone a happy Women's History Month, and I look forward to our continued partnership with John Jay College. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for those remarks. So I think a great place to start today would be all of your number of firsts. So as the first woman and first African-American Bronx Borough President, I think a lot of students and the rest of the audience would really love to know how you decided to go into politics and broke the glass ceiling, many ceilings, to make it to where you are today. So could you tell us a bit more about your journey?
Sure, great question. So I give a lot of credit to my time at the University at Albany. So I am proud to call myself a twofer. I am a graduate of SUNY, University at Albany, and CUNY, Baruch College. And I'm the first in my family to get her bachelor's degree as well as my master's degree. That means so much to me because my mom, as a single parent, sacrificed so much so that I can go to college like she did not. And it's my opportunity to make sure that I took advantage of that. So when I was at SUNY Albany, I learned about an internship with the New York State Assembly, and I ended up getting accepted into the program. And I was assigned to work for a longtime Bronx Assembly member named Aurelia Green. So people often say, well, Ms. Gibson, you're from Brooklyn. How'd you get to the Bronx? Aurelia Green. And the internship during my senior year of college led me to work for her. She hired me, she gave me a job. She really opened spaces for me, introduced me to elected officials in office in Albany. And it was a great introduction for me to public service. And fast forward, I would end up working for her for about 6 or 7 years until she decided to move back to the Bronx from Albany and took a job as the deputy borough president, along with my predecessor, Ruben Diaz Jr. And I was able at that time, since I worked for her, I was able to run for her office. And I won. And I was pursuing my master's degree at Baruch College. I was going to school part-time in the evenings and the weekends. And right as I was ready to graduate, my election was a week later. So I talked to my professors. They all understood. The classmates, everybody was so excited for me. And they all helped me campaign. And I was able to graduate May 27, 2009. And June 2nd, I got elected to the New York State Assembly. So it's been a great journey, serving 4 years in the Assembly, then running for the City Council. Every bit of my journey has been one that has been met with a lot of challenge, not easy for a woman of color running for an office, sometimes not designed for you, and putting yourself in different spaces. So it ultimately worked out, and I'm so grateful because that internship to me was the catalyst that led me to where I am today.
That is so informative. And I know we have a number of internships at this college and throughout the CUNY system. So actually, it would be really interesting to hear as a CUNY alumna for our students, how your experience specifically at CUNY helped you get where you are. I know you mentioned your colleagues at Baruch. And if you have any advice for them about resources they can take advantage of within John Jay and the broader CUNY system if they're choosing to pursue politics or any kind of service.
Right. So I definitely encourage students to explore whatever opportunities you think will help enhance your skill set. Whatever it is that you want to do career-wise, be the very best at it. There is no one else that can be you, right? You are you for a reason. And for me, internships was the way that I got my foot in the door. So if I wanted to be in the public sector, I volunteered for a community board. I volunteered for an elected official. I helped campaigns. I helped candidates run for office successfully. And when they won, they usually gave me an internship or they hired me. And so I was able to cultivate leadership even before I got elected and got the title in front of my name. So to me, internships, externships, volunteering your opportunity, finding spaces where you're surrounding yourself with people who can help you, right? Become a better person. And one thing I learned as a college student is we have to figure out where our strengths and where our weaknesses are. But a lot of the work you do, students, is really about networking. You have to network. You have to be able to be in spaces where you can collaborate with people. Oh, you're in this industry, you're in this industry. Let me get your business card. Let's have a conversation. Let's have coffee. And that's how you start building and building and building, right? Because you have to start somewhere, but don't have the mindset that you're going to get everything in one setting. It's not necessarily going to happen like that. You have to take this in stages and through a process. So you have to start from somewhere, right? I usually say start at scratch, and then you have to start to build. So that internship can lead to a job. That job can lead to this, right? And so I don't want you to think that everything is going to fall in your lap in one setting because it may not happen that way. Don't give up. Sometimes there may be a door closed, but remember, every door that may close for you is an opportunity for a better door to open, right? Sometimes the doors are closing, but they need to close because it's propelling you for an open door of opportunity.
Well, this is actually, a great way to move into the first question that's come up from a student. So Brian Acosta asked, he's a John Jay alumni, and he recently started a job, it sounds like at a nonprofit, and he was wondering how he could get different plans he has to help young people to the mayor. So if you could talk just about navigating different city systems in your work as an elected representative.
It's definitely a challenge. And so I want, the alumni to be steadfast, to be determined, right? Have a made up mind and don't let anyone change your mind. If you have a plan and you have a vision, then you need to follow through to get to that vision. Because sometimes government is a series of red tape, of bureaucratic systems that are sometimes designed to hold you back, to hold good ideas back, and to not be progressive. But this new mayor, Eric Adams, is bringing a different environment to City Hall. He's trying his very best to change how government works with New Yorkers, with not-for-profits, with city agencies. And so it's going to take time. We're only in month 3, and we have a lot of work to do. Some of the agencies are doing great work. So if you're talking about youth, Department of Education, or CUNY, or the Department of Youth and Community Development, DYCD, they administer and oversee all youth programs, Beacon, After School, Compass, Sonic, anything school, anything related young people, DYCD is the entity. So sometimes you have to get a proposal or an idea through a non-for-profit, but into an agency. Somebody at DYCD who can help you, that oversees youth programs, talking to the mayor's staff, talking at your local community board, wherever you live in New York City. So there's a couple of different outlets where you can try to get information on a new program, a new project, a new initiative, a new partnership. And then also the borough president, right? Every borough has a borough president. I am the president of the Bronx, but I work with all 4 colleagues in Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, and Staten Island. And I think it's important for the borough president's offices to understand about new ideas, new vision from organizations on the ground, because again, we don't claim to know everything, and we need our partners. We need community-based organizations who are partners in all this work. We share the same mindset, same priorities, same vision, same principles, same values. We want access and opportunity for young people, internships, opportunities for externships, apprenticeship opportunities, CTE programs, so many things and spaces where young people don't always have an outlet. And also, you know, our friends in the media needs to step up. So social media is a great tool on how you find out about information, resource fairs, job fairs, but also the media. The media always talks about something bad and negative, right? We need to make sure that we're using our voices to amplify the voices of young people. So there's public access TV, there's radio, there's so many things you can do as a not-for-profit to talk about the work of your organization, but what you're piloting. Send emails out, the private sector. There's lots of things you can do. So I want to give you options so that you know how to navigate through City Hall. But, you know, again, just be patient and expect that things will be changing. It's just going to take quite some time to feel it.
No, that's very helpful. And thank you for offering such broad advice. You talked about how you and others in positions of leadership share many common goals. And I'd like to turn a little bit to a question from our External Affairs office that's a little more specific. So we have a number of students at our college who hail from the Bronx. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about what your priorities are for the borough, especially in light of this pandemic.
I have lots of priorities, and I was one of the electeds out during the pandemic and saw our residents struggling for basic necessities along lines of food pantries and soup kitchens. It was a horrific time, but I also saw the resilience and strength of Bronxites. I saw nurses and social workers and guidance counselors and educators and school safety agents and crossing guards. I saw them out there working. I saw volunteers at churches giving out food, giving out PPE, and it just warmed my heart, but it also opened my eyes to the disparities that the Bronx has always faced, pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. So a couple of things that we're focusing heavily on: economic development, jobs. We need to bring more jobs to the Bronx that create a pathway to the middle class, not minimum wage jobs, but prevailing union wage jobs where you are actually stabilized and can take care of you and your family. 1 in every 4 households in the Bronx lost their job due to the pandemic. So as we reopen the retail, hotel industry, sports, the Broadway theater industry, so many things that were closed as a result of COVID that are now reopening. So many people will eventually start returning to work. But I think it's a different normal. It's a normal after 2 years of being traumatized, and we're not normal the way we were before. It's also recognizing health disparities and dealing with access to affordable, quality, and low-cost healthcare, making sure that there's a uniform system of primary care and mental health services and wraparound services. We have to deal with gun violence. Every day in New York City, someone is a victim of gun violence. Someone is shot, someone is victimized, someone is a victim of a crime, and it's unacceptable. And people see the city spiraling out of control. We have to get a handle on the supply of guns that are coming into New York City from out of New York City, predominantly down south. We have to focus on restorative justice programs, because everyone accused of a crime is not a criminal, and not everyone belongs in jail. Those are 2 big issues, and we're struggling with that right now. Because we know that if you create jobs, young people won't have time to possess a gun and be involved in a gang because they're going to work every day, or they're in a program, they're in an after-school program, they can go to the community center. So we have to deal with that. We have to deal with access to healthy food, green markets, farmers markets, have to deal with climate change. I have a lot of capital projects in the Bronx that we're working on. Metro North, we're expanding in 4 neighborhoods across the East Bronx. We're opening a children's museum this June, the first ever. And we're also doing a universal hip hop museum. We have thousands of units of housing. I have 15 new schools coming to the Bronx over the next several years, all public schools. So we have a lot of development, a lot of construction where there are job opportunities. So I often say, not everyone has a pathway to college, but they have a pathway to a career. So I also want to make sure if you don't want to go to college, you want to be an architect, an engineer, a designer, a plumber, a laborer, you can do that. Let's get you into a trade school. So I look at both. I don't want to put one entity on anyone, but I want you to have options, right? You know, sometimes as young people, we don't feel we have choices. We don't feel we have options. So I want to allow as many options as I can for all of our young people, not just in the Bronx, but in the city of New York.
Thank you for that. Your discussion there of jobs and job opportunities actually leads well to a question that just came up in the chat from Val about who would just like you to address in any way you can the gender pay gap and how you maybe see addressing this, and particularly in the jobs that you're creating in the Bronx.
We struggle as a nation with gender equality and pay parity in many different fields right here in New York City. Human services, social services, you find predominantly women and women of color, and they are often qualified professionally, education and years of experience, and they're paid 70 cents to the dollar of a white man. And then it's very prevalent in women of color, African American, Latina, Asian American, and Native American women. And those are disparities that we've been dealing with for a very long time. So let's focus just on the city municipal workforce, 300,000 plus city workers that work over all the city agencies. And we've also found a lot of wage gap. So what we've done, we introduced legislation in the city council. It was passed. We had a union, CWA Local 1180, predominantly Black and Latina women, who sued the city of New York in litigation, and they won the case. So now the city has to open up its books. We want to see data. We want to see salary history. We want to understand how much we're paying men and women who have the same level of education, same years of experience, but yet there's this disparity. The private sector is a lot more difficult to really get into because it's the private sector and they're not necessarily subjected to public legislation that we pass, unless we do it through the legislative process at times. But it's always a gray area. It's not as refined as we would like it to be. But we are making headway. We have, equal pay days for so many, and we've stood on so many steps at City Hall. I mean, it's been a long, long time. And I think for this generation of workforce now, we are fighting for equity so that all of you as the next generation can have better opportunities. And so it's going to be up to us and then all of you to continue this movement, to fight for pay equity, for gender parity, to make sure that you have women and men in spaces all across the city of New York, right? It's a struggle. We make progress, but we're not yet declaring victory.
Well, actually, speaking of bringing more diverse people into different spaces, as you know, electoral politics in New York and elsewhere in this country is predominantly pale and male. And so in teaching my gender and politics class, one thing we talk a lot about is developing a campaign and, of course, raising money to run that campaign. So I was wondering if you could just talk about how being a woman of color in a pale male field, how you've negotiated that and navigated that to raise money and develop, obviously, a number of very successful campaigns.
It's not easy. It is something I've struggled with my entire political career. But at this point, being an elected for the third time around, my third campaign that I successfully won, I know I have earned my right to be here. And I will not let anyone try to tell me otherwise. And as a woman of color, you have to stand on purpose. You have to stand on your faith and your values and your principles and know that you have a place in our society, because society will tell you that it's not your time. Fall back, take a seat, exit stage left. They will tell you all the negativity because people are afraid of successful women. They are afraid to see women in leadership positions. But it is up to us to defy the odds, defy the status quo, shatter the glass ceiling, create opportunities. But guess what we have to do? As we climb, we have to lift. We have to lift someone else with us so that when you climb that ladder of success, you can turn around and see someone that looks just like you, and you are not standing alone. Because many times I have stood alone. I have been the only woman in the room. I've been the only woman of color. And sometimes you feel like they just want you there for affirmative action or to show that it's a diverse group. But then when it comes time to making decisions, they put you to the side again, right? Behind the stage. And so it's hard. It's really hard, because even as you win successful campaigns, they still try to treat you different, like you're second class. But you have to step up and you have to demand that they treat you equally. Because oftentimes I say, you know what? I am your equal. I am your colleague. And guess what? I probably got more votes than you anyway. Like, I deserve to be here. And a lot of times it's about encouraging yourself. And so I want all of you to know that you have a space, you have a role to play, and don't let anyone define who you are. Don't let anyone define your success, because if you allow them to, they will. And so sometimes we have to motivate ourselves, because it's hard. It's really hard. Number one, it's hard to get there. And then it's equally hard to stay there, right? Because you have to run for re-election and you got 1.5 million people and 2 million opinions, because some people got more than one opinion and they all want to come at you in different ways. And as a leader, as someone who makes decisions, you have to look at the pros, the cons, the disadvantages, the advantages, and you have to make that decision based on the information you're given. And then you have to stand on that decision. You can't doubt yourself. You can't say, you know what, maybe I should have done this. Well, you've already made the decision. So that's why you have to be very deliberate and strategic in your decision-making, because sometimes you have to justify that decision and tell people, well, why did you make this decision, Ms. Gibson? Well, why did you do this and not that? So it's a lot of moving pieces back and forth. But I think one thing I've learned over the years is that I have earned my right to be here, and no one is going to tell me otherwise.
Well, actually, this leads well to a question that just popped up in the chat, actually from one of my students in my gender and politics class, Matthew McCauley. And he asked, he's asking you if you feel like you've received an appropriate amount of confidence and motivation from many male figures around you.
Yes, absolutely. I have. And I have my first male role model is my father, my late father, who passed away a few years ago as the first man in my life. My uncle, a proud Vietnam War veteran, who always reminds me we have to do more to take care of our vets. And I have a younger brother who looks up to me, and I have men in my life that have been critical and really instrumental in my work. And they're not afraid of a strong Black woman. That's an important point to make, because, you know, growing up, men are taught to be the head of household, to be the breadwinner, to be the king of the household, to let the woman fall back, not sideways, but behind you. And in this day and age, when roles are changing, women are dominating households. They're leading in the boardrooms as teachers and educators and principals. And you're seeing so many women in spaces that were dominated by men. And for all the things that we've still done, we still have to fight for equity. But I also always say that as much as I am a champion of women and women's rights, I also need our brothers. I need brothers to stand at our side and say, you know what? I'm not afraid to support a strong woman. I'm not afraid to stand at my woman's side and say, you know what? You do you and I do me, and we do this together because we're a team and we're a partner. That is so hard because a lot of things are very systemic and hereditary. I mean, certain men and women in our city have grown up a certain way, and that's their belief system. And so it's hard to change that sometimes, especially when you've been taught in your household that no, the men makes the decision and that's it. The women don't. But yes, women are making decisions now. So how do you do that differently? And how do you instill those values in your children? So yes, I've had great male role models, and even now as a borough president, I have a male initiative and I have a women's initiative. I support my young kings and my young queens as well, because I think you have to build up and amplify the voices of both young men and young women.
Thank you. That is so helpful. And actually, I'd like to turn and talk more specifically, speaking of, spaces and male dominated spaces. You were the former chair of the Public Safety Committee on City Council. And so obviously, criminal justice reform was a big topic. And you had to also mend relations between the NYPD and different communities. So given that, we are a school that trains many future law enforcement officers, I was wondering if you could talk about just kind of, maybe both two things, I guess, reflect on your experience trying to do, public safety reform, but also how you see the future under, especially under Mayor Adams now, who is himself a former NYPD.
One of the most challenging positions, Doctor, that I've ever had to experience as a council member, chairing public safety, learning about the role of our law enforcement partners, not just NYPD, corrections, probation, parole, so many different entities that all make up law enforcement, our prosecutors, our district attorneys. It is a very, very hard balance, because I think there's a history that we have to acknowledge of over-policing in communities of color and marginalized in immigrant communities. And I think when you look at factors like the Rockefeller drug laws that criminalize drug addicts instead of helping them, but incarcerated them, and that generation is now no longer in jail, but you have a population, you have a school to prison pipeline that we try to defy every day. There are so many different parts of this conversation that we are still unpackaging. But the one thing that I can say, public safety is the number one issue that every New Yorker cares about, no matter where you live. You have an expectation to be safe as a student on your campus, in the neighborhood, as you travel, as you go home. And sometimes that safety is compromised because you may live in a neighborhood that is riddled with crime, every day. There are cops on your corner. There are police vehicles speeding up and down the street. And that's all you know. And so sometimes it becomes a way of life. It becomes normal to think I can go to sleep and hear gunshots at night and that's okay, right? That's not normal, but we've been accustomed to think it is. And in many of our parts of the city, and predominantly working class and immigrant and low income communities, you're seeing a lot of these challenges. You're seeing the fractured relationship with NYPD that we're trying to fix and amend. We now have the first African-American female police commissioner in Keechant Sewell, and she's great and trying to change things. And Mayor Adams is a former captain of the department, having the law enforcement hat, but being an African-American man, being a father, right? Putting all of that together and saying, you know what? This is unacceptable. People should not possess guns and so freely use them to shoot people, to shoot near a daycare center, in a park, in a playground. A child is shot, a shooting in a hospital. Safe spaces, right? That are supposed to be safe, that sometimes don't feel safe anymore. Where people are telling me, Ms. Gibson, I don't feel safe going on the train. I don't feel safe traveling in my own neighborhood anymore. And there were times when I would go home and I would leave my door unlocked. Now I got to put 2 locks on my door. And this is what we're dealing with every day. So this is a college that is training law enforcement. I have many friends that are on the job that are getting their masters now with John Jay. And so it is important that we look at this from a very balanced perspective, the role of law enforcement, but also redefining what public safety is. You should feel safe in a neighborhood that's well lit, that has cameras, that does have a police presence, but you also need programs too. All of that is a part of public safety. And what we've seen, and Doctor, you may agree, because I experience this now, we have a generational gap. So my older generation of Bronx residents want to see more police because they equate public safety with the presence of police. So I feel inherently safe because there's a cop on my corner. Now I'm a young person. I know that those 2 cops on the corner, there can be a shooting right near them because that's happened. They can be shot themselves. And I know that. It doesn't always happen, but it has happened and it could happen. So the younger generation doesn't necessarily equate public safety with the presence of cops, because Black and brown New Yorkers always feel the cops harass them. You know, they see me standing on a corner, they want to harass me, search my pockets, do an illegal search. They want to pull me over, all sorts of things. But we are trying as a city to do better, a blueprint for public safety, and what that means to have an anti-crime unit that is only focused on guns, to focus on precision policing, targeted, not just targeting random people because they're Black and brown, they're standing on a corner in the South Bronx or Brownsville, but saying, you know what, this is a repeat offender. He's been arrested 50 times and now he's gotten arrested another time. Something is wrong in the system that this individual has been arrested so many times, right? Compared to a first offender. So we are about restorative justice programs, alternative to incarceration and detention. We're about looking at prevention and not detention. Detention should be the last resort, but we have to do prevention. And we can't wait until you get arrested and you're in criminal court, and then we give you programs. We should be giving you programs before you ever get arrested.
That's
tough.
I mean, I love that, prevention over detention. I mean, that
Yes.
should be, everybody should be repeating that on loop all day, every day. I guess just seeing the questions and the comments that have come into the chat, I'd like to swing back now to more kind of women in politics related questions. And just there's a comment from Virginia, who's an alum, who said she just wants to say that she can really relate to what you're saying and has seen in changes in terms of women supporting other women. And she says it's exciting to be at a time where strong women are supporting other women as you are doing. And then Shay, who took my class last semester, wants to know, since the recent election, there has been an increase, as we know, especially since 2018 and especially the 2018 midterms federally, there's been an increase in the number of women in politics. And she wants to know if you've seen more women of color, especially occupying different roles in politics, not only in, I guess, electoral politics, but other areas from where you are.
Yes, I have. So I am very familiar with our public sector. So as I mentioned, social services, human services, you often find many women working. And I think the last election in 2021, when I ran for borough president, there was a momentum growing. And I think it was off the cusp of Kamala Harris becoming vice president. And seeing this African-American, Asian-American woman ascend to the second most important, powerful position in the land was a huge victory for Black and brown girls across the country. I always say my favorite picture of her inauguration day is a picture of a little girl somewhere in the States looking at the oath of office, and she had her hand raised too, just like Kamala. And it makes me so emotional because it reminds me that every little girl, every little boy should look at leadership and see themselves. They should look at a Kamala Harris or me and see the possibilities that exist, right? And since that time, we've had a groundswell of women and women of color running for office at the local level. The city council, the body that I left last year, when I was there, I chaired the women's caucus. We were only 15 women out of 51 members, right? Back 5-1 members and 1-5 women. And because of the election and this movement called 21 and 21, an organization, Amplify Her, we were able to capture 31 seats. So there are now 31 women out of 51 council members that are women from 5 boroughs. It's the largest, and it's the first time in the history that the city council has been led by a majority of women. And we didn't finish there, but the speaker of the New York City Council, the second most powerful position in New York City, is led by the first Black woman, Adrienne Adams. She is the speaker of the city council from Southeast Queens. And you have me making history as the borough president. You have Darcel Clark. She's the district attorney in the Bronx, first Black woman district attorney in the state of New York. So there are so many examples. Donovan Richards is my Queens borough president. He's the first African-American male elected Queens borough president. So the brothers are making history too, not just the sisters, but it is such a profound moment. And it just reminds you that your ancestors came before you and fought so that you could be here today. And so now it's our time to shine, to show the world who we are and what we can do. But again, as I said, as you climb, you have to lift someone else as well.
Well, and actually that the climbing and lifting someone, there's this is a good next question from Ava, who wants to know, what is your biggest piece of advice for women thinking about running for office?
Stay focused. Stay focused. If you are determined to run for office, then please stay focused, because there will be so many hitches along the way, so many barriers to you qualifying to get on the ballot. I encourage you to learn the process, research what it takes to run for elected office, because many people, many candidates get jammed up on the process and they don't qualify and don't even make the ballot, right? Hire the very best team. A banging election lawyer that knows election law like the back of their head, and make sure that you are bringing together a team that shares your vision, that believes in you, not just to get a paycheck, but they believe in you. They believe in you as a candidate, what you want to do and what you could do. And also, I think you have to define your role. As a candidate running for office, you are projecting yourself like a product. You're selling yourself to the voters of your county, of your region, of your city, of your municipality. And at the end of the day, you have to tell them why, out of all the people, you are the best person for the job. It's just like running for student government. Your classmates have to vote for you. Well, why should I vote for you over her? Because sometimes you think that you may be the only person of color, the only woman in the race, but you may not necessarily be. And when I ran for borough president, there were two women. I was the African-American woman, and then it was a Latina. And we were both gearing up to make history, because there had never been a woman, right? So any woman would have made history. And it was hard because I had to make a distinction between myself and my candidates. But I also say, if you're planning to run for office, know your value and know your record. So if you have a record, stand on it. Because if you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything. Stand on your record, and don't be afraid to talk about the work you've done and what you intend to do, because people have agendas. They have all sorts of, anxiety and all sorts of stereotypical things they'll think about you just based on what you look like, but they don't know who you are. So through a campaign, you are telling your story of triumph, of survival, of hardship, of everything you've endured and how you've come to be a candidate. So to me, research, assemble your team, figure out what you want to do, know your value, build your base, and then market yourself as a formidable campaign.
Well, it really sounds like, and maybe you've never encountered this, but there's a lot of political science research talking about what's called the confidence gap. So there's men who have no political experience tend to wake up and say, I want to run for president, and they'll just go ahead and do that. Whereas women are more likely to think, well, first I should run maybe for school board president, and maybe then work my way up to city council. So I was wondering if you could talk about how you have negotiated or overcome the confidence gap, because you've obviously been very successful and negotiated very difficult spaces. And so, what can you say to women who may feel not very confident?
Yeah, and that'll happen, and it does happen. Women tend to wait a little longer because we feel like it's not the right time. You want to create a pathway. You want to start somewhere small, right? Your local community board, your civic group, your Democratic club, and you want to make your way. But sometimes you'll have men that'll come in, raise millions of dollars, and then they'll run a nice campaign because they hired some great staff that they can pay. You can't, and they win. And they're not necessarily the best candidate. And that happens a lot. And it's discouraging for women to even think that there's a chance you could win. So many of my colleagues that I serve in the city council, I won on my first try. They won on their third and fourth and fifth because they kept trying and trying and trying, and they never gave up. So that's the one thing I'll say, don't give up, because you may not win on the first go round, but you may win on the second, you may win on the third. So you have to really set yourself up where you have to believe that this is exactly what you've been called to do, and this is exactly what you want to do. And then sometimes you could get discouraged, but you have to believe that there's a role for you to play somewhere. It may not be elected office, but it could be in public service in some way. And, and I try not to be, even though I've had successful campaigns, I never get too comfortable. Never get too comfortable in your space. It's okay to be confident, but don't be too comfortable, because at any given time, someone can pull the rug out of you. The same people that watched you rise will watch you fall, right? And they'll smile in your face. That Vanessa, she was good while she was there, and then they celebrate your demise. And so I think it's important to always be humble. At the end of the day, you have a title in front of your name that you earn, but the title doesn't make me who I am. I'm still Vanessa at the end of the day. my niece and nephew, I'm Auntie Vanessa. I'm V to my friends. I'm still Vanessa. I'm still the same person that they know. I just now have a greater responsibility. And too many elected officials run for office for the wrong reasons and get this cloud over their head like they're God, and they're standing on a pedestal and they can do any and everything, and they get power struck. I don't ever get power struck. Having power is a lot of responsibility, and it comes with the good and the bad. When people call you out your name, you see your name in the paper in a negative way, they're talking smack about your family, and you want to hit somebody, but you don't, because again, you're frustrated, but you can't react because that's what they want you to do. So you can't do it. So you have to have the higher ground. And as women, we have the higher ground a lot of times. And I do that all the time. I swallow my pride and I hold my head up high and I say, you know what? I will get through this and I'll deal with this at another time. Because at the end of the day, you're going to respect that I'm the borough president. So it is not easy. And I definitely encourage all of you to have the confidence, but sometimes you may not have the confidence, but that's where your friends come in. Have a support system. Have a support system that can help you, keep you up, and strengthen you as you go about your campaign.
Well, and actually, talking about going places, I wonder, and going places and not getting too comfortable. I wonder if you feel comfortable talking about, what you see in your future. Is there a run for president? Is there maybe a run for the United States Senate? What do you see in your future politically?
That's so funny. Everyone asked if I'm running for mayor because the natural ascension from borough president, as Eric Adams did, is run for mayor. And I'm like, I just got here. I'm only 3 months in, but there are people that are already planning and plotting, right? And so even as I have 4 years and a re-election and then another 4 years, there are already people that are planning in the next 8 years, right? And so, yes, you have to develop a plan. I have not figured out what I want to do after borough president because I really am focused on the matter of my work at hand today. But at some point, I am going to figure out what my path will look like. So even now in my first year, I'm already getting ready for my re-election in 3 years because you have to plan. And as women, it's hard to raise money. And I want to build a strong war chest of contributors, of funders, of supporters, of everyday Bronxites that give to our campaign so we can build and we can build and build and build and get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that takes time. If I waited until year 3, I would only have a year. But now that I'm doing it now, I got 3 years to do this. So I have time. And so you have to plan, right? Everything you do in life is about a plan, because if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. You have to have a plan. It may not be the best plan, but put something on paper and a series of objectives and how you can get to each of those and figure out what you want to do. It's just a blueprint. It can be refined, it can be reformed, it can be adjusted, but have an idea of what you want to do to get you to that victory line. And so I am not thinking about mayor just yet. Many people are thinking about it for me. I am young enough where I've worked mostly all of my life, so I can actually retire early, which I'm kind of excited about. But I know that there'll be something else for me to do, because you never really retire because there's always some service that you have to give back. So stay tuned, not yet.
Well, actually, then I wonder too, maybe just speaking of women, ascending into many places into politics, if you could comment on the recent Supreme Court nomination process, if you feel like talking about that. I mean, speaking about bringing together many of the themes you've addressed about race, gender, white male spaces, confidence. I was just wondering if you'd like to address and offer your thoughts on Ketanji Brown Jackson's recent hearings for Supreme Court nominee.
Wow. Let me say that I am so excited about the nomination of Ketanji Brown Jackson. She's going to be an incredible asset to the Supreme Court. And I am speaking her nomination and her confirmation into existence. But during the confirmation hearings, I was watching it and, like many, getting abundantly frustrated and really pissed off, because I believe that as a Black woman nominee, she was critiqued. Her character was put into question, her record, accusations of her being soft on crime, right? Everything was thrown at her, but she showed such strength and composure. And I love that because I said, you know what? That's what women do. When we feel attacked, we're not going to attack you again, because guess what? She sees the victory line. She sees the bigger picture, and she sees that confirmation. So you know what? I'm going to sit here. I'm going to take all this criticism. I'm going to answer all of y'all crazy questions that have no validity, and I'm going to stand my ground, because at the end of the day, she sees herself on the Supreme Court. But it was just frustrating. I mean, Sonia Sotomayor, Latina from the Bronx, she went through the same thing. They all went through that, because we are in a system where the US Senate is dominated by older white men. They try to take away our reproductive rights, our civil rights, our voting rights, and everything else in the book. They want to overturn everything from Roe v. Wade to civil rights era laws, and it's not acceptable. So having someone like Judge Jackson on the bench is going to be crucial to maintaining that balance of democratic values, because we're living in a society where they want to undo every good thing we've done and really just reverse this country and go backwards. But it was frustrating watching those hearings. I loved seeing her in that space and knowing that, you know, she looks like me and she's the first of the first, and she's a public defender, which is also historic. And public defenders do just that, serve the public. So it is so amazing in so many ways. And I just, you know, we were all encouraging her on social media, like, you hold your head up high, Justice. You got this. Keep going, sister. We are pushing you on, because I felt like her sitting in that seat, she represents all of us.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and so what then would your advice be to students about things they can do in terms of, you know, what issues should they be paying attention to? What things can they do to get involved to help push back a lot of these trends that are frankly trying to roll back everything from, you know, voting rights to reproductive rights?
Well, I think the good part of a lot of our work is around organizing, and we've seen young people organize like never before. I think about climate change and the climate march that we had in New York City a few years ago, and it was led by young people. And I think it's a time for young people to amplify their voices, to realize the influence and power that you bring to the table. And CUNY students have been organizing. Many are organizing in Albany right now on a new deal for CUNY. We're fighting for CUNY to become free again, because it was a time when CUNY, you know, wasn't as diverse student-wise as it was. And a lot of the, you know, the students didn't look like they do now. And tuition was free then, and now tuition is not, right? So I think there's a lot of things that our young people can do through the local community board, joining as young as 16, being involved civically, understanding the process by which, you know, legislators do this work, volunteering your time, and really organizing, campaigning, sending messages, organizing a group to go to Albany, to go down to DC, calling your elected officials. We do tours. I did tours all the time in the city council. When I took groups of students from the Bronx to City Hall, they shadowed me for a day so they can see the work I did. And it was amazing. I mean, you have to give young people spaces. You have to introduce them and orient them to your world so they understand what you go through and what it means to be a legislator. So there's a lot of things young people can do. And trust me, there is always an issue to fight for. Civil rights, reproductive health. I was with Planned Parenthood yesterday, the assault on that. Housing is a big issue. We have an affordability crisis right now. We have 200,000 evictions pending in housing court in New York City. So people are standing to lose their homes. So there's a lot of things that are happening. So there's always an issue. You just have to find whatever issue you care the most about and figure out the organizations involved and maybe volunteer with them, Vocal New York, and, you know, Make the Rules, so many different immigration groups, citizenship groups. There are groups for everything, trust me. And you can figure out, you know, where you fit, your interests align, and then join those organizations.
That's fantastic advice. And so we don't have that much time left. Just if there are any questions, any more questions from students, I've kind of taken over asking all the questions. There don't seem to be. So would you have any final thoughts or remarks on really just anything? I mean, I feel like we've learned so much from you, and if you just have any final advice or other things you'd like to add. And again, I encourage everybody, if you have other questions, we still do have a few minutes, please put them in the chat.
Sure. So, I think I've talked a lot. These were excellent questions, and I hope that, to the students at John Jay, I've given you a little bit of insight into who I am and my journey to become the Bronx Borough President. But I always say that, your journey is different from mine. Everyone's journey is different, but your commitment should not be. I think we all want the same things. We all want to be successful. We all want a pathway to college and careers. And there are so many young people out there that don't ever see themselves in a college setting. And many young people are denied access and opportunity, and they look just like us. And so what CUNY and John Jay and Baruch and all the other colleges have meant for us is a real pathway to success. Many elected officials today are CUNY graduates themselves. And if it were not for CUNY, we would not be here. So I would never, ever turn my back on CUNY when it has done so much for me. And it is important that the next generation of leaders understands that while things are not perfect, my generation, your generation, we have made it easier for all of you. And now it's your job to be activists, advocates, champions, right? I say be the president of Me Fi Me, right? All about you. Me Fi Me. Be the president of your fan club, because no one is going to fight for you better than you. No one is going to tell your story better than you. But if you allow someone else to tell the narrative of who you are, that narrative could be spun many different ways. And for many of us in New York City and the Bronx, and so many places that have been marginalized and just devastated and disinvested, people have given up on us. They just don't believe anything good comes out of New York City, comes out of the Bronx. And I've heard that over and over and over again. But guess what? I am telling a different narrative just by my ascension, and I'm using my power as I climb to lift someone else. So we are recognizing young people in spaces. We're recognizing those college-bound students going to Yale with a full scholarship, and HBCU going to CUNY, first in their family to graduate. Yes, 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 yes. That's what we want to hear. I don't want to hear about all the violence and the crime every single day. Tell me about a young person that grew up in a single parent home that is going to college, or that single mother that raised her child and is now going to a HBCU. Those are the stories of the Bronx. Those are the stories of survival, of resilience, when you never give up, when even though the odds were stacked against you time and time again, you prove people wrong. But most importantly, you prove to yourself that you are a strong person. And sometimes our strength is the only thing we know. The only thing you can do is to be strong, because a lot of times you have to be strong for someone else in your family, your friend. You have to be strong for yourself. You have to be strong for others around you. And it's not easy. Certainly it's not easy for women, because women, we just govern different. We lead with our heart sometimes, even though that's criticized in itself. But I think for me, realizing that I have gotten to this point is just a recognition of my ancestors' work and the people that labored into me and poured into me so much. And now I have to pour into the next generation of young people. I love these spaces. I love talking about my work, but I also love inspiring the next generation, because someone inspired me, and now I get to inspire other people by not just my words, but by my actions. When I open new schools and I cut the ribbon on a new apartment building and I open a new museum, those are institutions that will be there forever. And guess what? They have my name on it. The library has my name as borough president. And so generations, when I'm long and gone, someone will look and say, who is Vanessa L. Gibson? And they'll be able to look me up. And I really think about that, because these are institutions for generations, and we're building in the Bronx and New York City. So I'm excited, and I want to thank all of you. And if there are any other questions, happy to take those. But thank you so much for your time today.
Well, and actually, we have some great closing questions. So one, Ernest Morales would like to thank you for your continued support for the people in the Bronx and bringing opportunities and hope. And then Ruby Cordero and Val Montgomery have two questions, I think, that are great to close on. One is if you are taking any interns for your office this summer. She would love to volunteer. She's from the Bronx. And two, Val is wondering, Montgomery is wondering if you could leave your contact information for everybody.
Oh, sure. So yes, yes, and yes. We actually, in our office, we have an education and youth division, and my staff work very closely with parents, with school leaders, we work with educators, we work with unions, we work with youth groups, we work with everyone. I make appointments to the CECs and the panel fed policy. I have a youth council that I'm reinstituting as borough president 3 months in. So we're trying to galvanize and get all the young people across the Bronx together because we want to have youth forums. We want to be able to bring young people together to talk about what they want to see in their community, in their neighborhood, programs, right? I mean, the most unbelievably frustrating thing is when you have all the older people talking about work they want to do for young people. Hello, where are the young people, right? And that happens a lot at community boards, at civic groups. And again, no disrespect to my seasoned leaders and my veterans. I just want to make sure that we have a diverse group of people. That's all. Because I also think we got to take care of our seniors too, just like they took care of us. It's our time to help them. So I look at it from multiple levels. We have internships. I work with My Brother's Keeper. So we're able to get fellows at high school and college level. So we're able to open our doors to young people who want a chance to learn from us and grow. And we will put you to work. We have a lot of things we want to do in the Bronx. A lot of students with disabilities, students living in temporary housing. We have to deal with food issues, food equity. We have to deal with safe spaces. So many different things we have to deal with around young people, but it's also their families too. So as we help young people, remember, we're helping the family too. So we have to have a support network to help parents as well. And so, yes, I'll leave my info. I am accessible through all social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. All my channels are BP Gibson, BP Gibson, and Vanessa L. Gibson. You can find me, do a search, and I'll put my information in the chat. But definitely send us an email, hit us up on social media, and we will make sure that we can find some place for you. And even if it's not necessarily within our office, we work with everyone. So if you tell me you live in Kingsbridge and you want to, work or volunteer for someone, we can introduce you to the Kingsbridge Bid or the Kingsbridge Heights Community Center, right? Montefiore, Marshall, there's so many different organizations in the Bronx, and we just want to connect you to the right space.
Well, thank you so much, Borough President Gibson, for coming and taking your very little spare time and spending it with us. I wish everybody was here to give you a round of applause in real life, but consider this your virtual round of applause. You. And thank you so much again. And we'll be sure to share your information with everybody who came today. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you.